Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about ethics and morality. This lesson will be organized in two basic parts. Will be divided into basic parts. In the first part, we'll talk about the relationship between ethics and morality, and then how these two will relate to psychology. And in the second part, we'll describe what is good. How can we define goodness and how ethics and psychology relate to the concept of goodness. So let's start with the first part. Is there any difference between ethics and morality? Some scholars say no. Frankena, for example. Others consider ethics as strictly different from morality. Why? Julianas, for example, consider ethics as a techne to bio. This is Greek to say an art of life. So according to Annas, who is a scholar on that studies privately mainly ancient philosophy, ethics was for Greeks ethicists a technology of life. So a number of rules and principles that could have helped people to live better, while morality is more a reflection on these rules and principles. So while ethics is something that we can repeat once we understood the principle, morality is more of a reflection. This kind of distinction reminds us of the big two groups in which we divided in the formal lesson ethics. We said, in fact, that ethics was distinguishable in descriptive ethics and meta-ethics, where descriptive ethics is about facts, is about the description of what we consider ethical, while meta-ethics is a reflection is a reflection beyond ethics, is reflection on what ethics should be, what kind of tools it should use. So in this sense, the distinction between ethics and morality is somewhat reflected in these big two groups in which we distinguish ethics, because on the one hand we have the technology, the application, the facts in which we can observe, through which we can observe ethical events. On the other hand, we have a reflection on what makes something ethical. Now, for Frankena, although there is no strict distinction, separation between ethics and morality, it is true, he says, that morality arises from a reflection that we need to do on a conflict. A conflict of what? A conflict of what is deon, remember the word that we used last time. A conflict of duties, of necessities. I feel it's necessary to protect my country, but at the same time, in order to protect my country, I have to betray another human being. This is unfortunately the usual condition that people who are living in a totalitarian, under a totalitarian government has to face. So morality entails a reflection on a present conflict of duties. Now in your homework you're going to read Socrates and, more than Socrates, Plato, because Plato wrote about Socrates, since Socrates didn't write a word. So we know what Socrates thought partially through Plato. And in Plato's Apology, or in Plato's Euthyphro, there are reflections on morality, on what should be the right thing to do. In the Apology, for example, and in Meno, Socrates wonders whether it's better to defend his beliefs that are somehow demanded from him by a god, by a sort of an inner god from his daimon, from his guardian angel, or just if it's good to obey to what the new government wants from him. So he wonders whether it's better basically to die in order to be faithful to himself, or to remain alive and be a loyal husband and father and teacher, and obey to the laws of a government that sounds, that feels unfair to him. This is a true moral quarrel that requires a theoretical reflection. This is what morality is. So, according to Annas and partially according to Frankena, morality is what entails, what demands a theoretical reflection on actions we are going to take. Later on, you'll be studying Kant, whom we'll mention as one of the representatives of the deontological ethics. And according to Kant as well, ethics has to do with facts, with action. So our reason is always a purer reason, is always a theoretical reason that can find a practical application, and then we can reflect on its practical application. But the application is going to be an application, it's going to be a fact, it's going to be an action. So the critique of our reason, the analysis of the limits of our reasons in its theoretical or practical application will be always theoretical, because its factual application is something that somehow escapes our immediate reflection. Nevertheless, it's difficult to distinguish between ethics and morality, and it's sometimes useless to try to find a neat distinction between these two disciplines, because in fact morality, etymologically speaking, is the Latin term for ethics. Now both ethics and morality in fact mean costumes, clothes, habits. I mean in the literal sense of it. Ethics in fact comes from ethos, while morality comes from mos, and in both cases they indicate the clothes, the outfit we decide to wear in order to feel normal, feel fine, feel good inside the society we want to live in. So again, ethics and morality has to do with the sense of belonging to a group, belonging to a set of norms and rules that allow us to live well, to live in a comfortable and respectful way toward ourselves and toward the others. Now, again, it's here that psychology can't avoid to take a part into this reflection, and philosophers like Aristotle, Plato, but even later Marx, Nietzsche, will be not only philosophers. After all, the neat distinction between the divorce between philosophy and psychology will happen in the 19th century. We have to wait until Stumpf in order to start talking about two separate sciences. In late 19th century, by the way. So until then, philosophy and psychology are the same, are an investigation into the nature of the human being, trying to understand what the human being is. So as it concerns ethics and psychology, the definition of normality is, of course, something that worries both disciplines. Now, if we move to the 20th century with Lang or Trilling, we'll see how normality could represent a threat to our psychological balance. Lang defines normality as a system of projection and introjection. So we feel normal because somehow we humor a number of inputs that allow us to be part of that system, but it might happen that these acceptance from us of outer inputs would damage what we really are, what we really feel, and lead us to a form of disimbalance and a psychological distress. So, for example, in The Politics of the Family, Lang imagined three big possible disorders that can come from the family system or the society system. In both cases, there's an attempt of preventing the individual from feeling one with the surrounding society. In the case of the family system, the family tells the individual, we are going to protect you from the outside. In the case of the society system, there's the politic of terror from that entails all that can come from what you don't know. So you need to feel afraid from what can happen to you while you are here, while you are living in the society. And the government is there to defend you from all these horrible threats that can come from the foreigner, the immigrant, or simply the sick one, or the invalid one, and so on and so on. What can happen to the individual if, because of these threats and his or her deep desire of living a healthy and warm, reassuring life, decides to accept these threats and to desperately be part of the system, cutting at the expense of cutting himself or herself off what he or she feels. It can happen that his personality gets engulfed and collapse under the external inputs that don't correspond to what he or she exactly feel, and she has to censor all that she's actually living in order to obey to something external that doesn't match, and then the implosion. Or it can happen that there's an hysterical reaction for which there's the desire to second to all that is happening outside and keep it together at the expense of stability. Or it might happen that there's a schizophrenic reaction for which I actually detach myself from what I feel, and there's the ongoing coming back and going to what I need to feel. And in that case, in order for the system to work, I have to remain in that condition because I'm part of that functioning. This is actually not something new. The word Marx coined, which is not in fact, of course, a neologism, but is a word that we know belongs to Marx's vocabulary, is the word alienation, where alien, alienus from Latin, means exactly who is different. Who is different from what? From itself. So, Trilling, another contemporary scholar, tried to build a sense of normality that is all grounded on sincerity. What is a sincerity? Sincerity is an interesting word because it comes from, again, Latin, which means sine cera, where sine means without and cera means wax. Basically, a sincere person is a person that doesn't have a strong persona, doesn't have this kind of armor around him or herself that protects him from the outside. Trilling cites Achilles, the Homeric hero, as one example of a sincere person. He decides to give in to his rage, to fight, although in not a orthodox, heroic way for his people, because he can't detach himself from what he is perceiving in that moment. The first book of the Iliad is the perfect example of this sincerity. He really can't have any more of what Agamemnon is saying because he is just a spoiled king, and he is putting at stake the life of his companions and his beloved one, so he's sick of it. Athena helped him to resist to that, but he has to be in contact with his rage and to handle it. But this is abnormal, in the sense that this behavior is a behavior that our society doesn't encourage, because feeling rage, being in rage, and giving to our rage is something that disembalances the group in which you are. It brings disequilibrium, so you need to temper yourself. Nietzsche was talking about prohibited emotions. There are many ways that lead us to alienation. to feel ourselves far away from us, to feel ourselves a stranger to us. One of it is, as Nietzsche was saying, not giving space to the emotions that we instinctively feel. And Freud, of course, gave to all these intuition a big house, because of course his discovery of the unconscious made us aware of not being owner of our own psyche, our own body, our own life. So there's some kind of moral ego that is always there to reproach us, to scold us, and to try to create something that can fit in the society. And we try to shape ourselves in a way that is normal, but this normality brings with itself a huge abnormality. Fromm wrote a beautiful essay on Marx, Erich Fromm, in which he coined this term, the pathology of normalcy. So sometimes we care so much of being part of the society because we want to be connected to others that we lose connection with ourselves. So we tend to get fixated to one object. That could be money or another person that is extremely important for us. And this fixation upon which we built our sense of well-being, of normalcy, of goodness, alienates ourselves from our passions, from what we're feeling. Our passions, our feelings can overthrow our sense of stability. So it's absolutely dangerous to listen to them. So better to work hard and gain lots of money, our fixated object, or better, the object on which we are fixated. Better to be loyal to our husband and wife, even if we are not anymore in love with them, or we never loved them and we don't know what love means, rather than exploring what we are feeling in that moment and in the death of ourselves. This is this gloomy image, I'd say, but we can't deny that it exists, and ethics helps us to keep that status quo, to keep that balance strong, because ethics gives us the techne to build. Ethics gives us the technology, the rules that can be repeated over and over in order to make that balance possible, in order to keep that balance steady and strong for as long as we wish. And then one day we discover we are dead, spiritually dead. We are detached from ourselves and from others, and we don't know why. Now, let's look into the second part of our lesson. What is good? So, what ethics would say about goodness in relation to our life? What would be goodness and what would be the best thing to do in order to be an ethical person, in order to wear nice clothes, nice outfit that can make us be a good person, a good citizen, a good human being among others. As I told you during last lesson, the category of normative ethics is a box within which we can put other main schools. As mentioned before, there's the deontological ethics, and we'll talk about deontological ethics in relation to Kant. Then there's consequentialist ethics, which is a form of a teleological ethics, meaning that it's an ethics that is oriented to the telos. Telos, again, is a Greek word to say goal. So consequentialist ethics is an ethics that is more focused on the goals we want to attain. And in this ethics, we'll place utilitarian ethics, and we'll briefly talk about Mill and Bentham. Then you'll be reading more about the two of them in your class. Then we have virtue ethics, that is again an ethics that is grounded on the goals we want to attain. It's this ethics to a teleological ethics, and it's an ethics that is based on the dispositions, the character, the traits we want to cultivate in order to be good persons. And it is with this ethics, this kind of ethics, that we can mention the work of Aristotle and Plato. So it's interesting to notice that according to this ethics, differently from ideontological ethics, you can't decide a priori what is good. Because what is good is connected to what you do. And your action is, in fact, a reaction to the world. A reaction that can be phronetic, important word, that can be, phronetic is Greek again, from phronesis, and means practical reason. So your reaction can be guided by a form of wisdom, by a form of practical reasoning that is embedded in your behavior, but certainly is something that comes with your being in the world. So, as McDowell noticed in a very beautiful article he wrote on deliberation and moral development, doing well is an unconditional a priori for being ethical. We cannot be originally good, but we can become so through action. It's through doing something that we can be good persons. So doing is the a priori, is the fact that we can act, and hopefully we can act well. The a priori, the condition of possibility for my being ethical. as Korsgaard, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, noticed in a beautiful essay on Kant and Kant's criticism of eudaimonism. Eudaimonism is a Greek word, daimon, to say being, guardian angel, flourishing. According to her point of view, our ethical acting, our sense of what is good and what is wrong is reactive. So pleasure is what activates the receptivity to our moral reasoning. We reason in a moral way because we feel that it's pleasant to act in that way. So, for example, that are people that love doing social work, although they don't gain money, although they live a distressful life, because that is what makes them feel well, because this is where they find pleasure. So, pleasure and the exercise of what we feel is pleasant is in fact our imperative, is in fact what drives our action. So the summum bonum, the best, the highest good is not something that comes before, prior to our moral law, because our moral law is deeply embedded in our character, in what we are, and in how we react to what happens to us. Now, it is difficult to say that Plato was for a virtue ethics. I don't think it's possible to state anything like that in a strong or even in a weak way. Plato's ethics is a very complex ethics that is deeply entangled with his metaphysics and his epistemology. For what matters to our lessons, we can say that, as Martha Nussbaum remarked, the good is not of this world for Plato. So the good is goodness is in essence that. We can see from different perspectives as an imitation in the real life. So goodness is, as he explained in his Timaeus, one of his most difficult dialogues, I might say, it's enousia. Greek word to say a being, in essence, and this one is tauton, again Greek, to say is matter, is matter is eule in Greek, but tauton means this one is something that is in every part similar to itself, is to auton, is the same, and at the same time this one is tateron, is something that is different from itself. So goodness is in essence that is identical in its part and is but at the same time it reflects itself in different ways in reality, and every part of itself it's at the same time the same and many. How can we explain this in an example? Generally, in my classes, I use the beautiful play of the beautiful tragedy of Sophocles, Antigone, to explain the tragedy of goodness. So, Antigone is someone that, by its name even, has to rebel against what is what her uncle and king wants her to do. Antigone, in fact, is a name that comes from Antigone. Gone is comes from the verb gignomai, which means being born. So Antigone, by her genos, by her birth, has to rebel against her own blood, her own uncle, who decided to not give the burial to her brother, although her brother somehow would deserve it by blood, but he went against his will, the uncle's will, Creon, and so he cannot receive the burials, the honors any that person would deserve. This is intolerable for Antigone, and she decides to rebel, although this would cost her life. And this is Antigone's point of view, and we can understand very easily that from her angle, this essence that we call justice can be interpreted only in this way. But then we move to the point of view of Creon, and Creon has just been appointed king, and he has to keep his kingdom together. He has to be strong and avoid any reason to rebel against him, and give space for turmoil. So he has to be strong. And not to mention Ismene, that is the sister of Antigone, and somehow she has to leave the moral conflict of losing her sister, losing her brother, and not to mention lover, in a fight that for her temperament she might recompose in a different way. So you know, as in every tragedy, but in every event of life, good, justice is something that we feel is there. It's absolutely evident, is apparent. We cannot deny its presence once it's speaking inside of us, Antigone, for example. But at the same time, it can have different words. It can be expressed in different ways. That's why constitutions of government change. There's something absolutely true in what they are stating, and it's behaving against the constituted laws of a society means going against yourself, because the truth that these laws are expressing are somehow holy. They come from a deeper place inside of each of us, but at the same time they might change. because the time is different. So, according to Plato, goodness is an idea. Now, the word idea is a very technical term in Plato because idea, again, from Greek, is a verb that comes from, is a word, a noun that comes from the verb orao, which means to see, to watch, to witness. So the idea is something that we have seen because it's the aorist, so it's the past of the verb to see, and interiorized. So it's something that we can see, we can witness to, we can attend to, but every time we try to put this essence into words, somehow we limit its power because it's just one point of view from which we look at this essence, at this identity. Now, just to conclude on Plato, what can we do? Since goodness it's this fleeting, elusive essence. We can try to cultivate ourselves in such a way that we can feel our own essence and our own presence in harmony with what is around us. So we can live, I'd say, in justice. We can live in harmony with our own essence. From here, the Book of Republic, in which the books of Republic, about the dialogue of Republic, in which Plato discusses the idea of goodness, as relating to justice. So as Cephalus shows in the first book, the idea of justice should be related to hard work with the hope that something better can happen. Then we move to the terrible position stated by Thrasymachus, according to which justice is just the right of the stronger one. So if we live in hope, Socrates had shown before, we are not living in a just way. We are just seconding to a desire that we don't place in ourselves but in something outside. Then Thrasymachus says that justice is should be considered the strength of the one who is in charge, but if so, again, we wouldn't live in justice, because if it's just one person to be stronger than others, then others would rebel eventually, and we wouldn't live in a balanced and just system. Then in the book 7, Plato illustrates a myth, the myth of the cave, which is a very complex myth in which Plato's psychology, epistemology, and ethics, and even politics overlap in a beautiful, beautiful way, because it's a very simple story in which basically he says that human beings live their lives in a cave. They are in chain and they look at the walls in front of them, at the wall, and they see shadows in front of them. and they think that these shadows are facts, are what is real, what is in fact happening. But then one of them realizes these shadows are just shadows, they are not facts. So this person managed to get free and to discover that there was a fire that was projecting the shadows of small statues on the walls. So he realized that the truth is not in the shadows, but is in what he's looking at now. And then he keeps walking in the cave, so he keeps coming in contact with this truth that is definitely unsettling and frightening, and he manages to get outside the cave. Of course, I'm synthesizing and summarizing all of it in a very quick way. So outside the cave, he realizes that that wasn't life. That wasn't real, that what he was living in the cave was just a small extract of reality. He sees the light, the sun hits his eyes, and he is in shock and it's painful, but then he can see that in fact he was just looking at small statues that were on the top of the head of people that were outside the cave and were living a normal life. Then he comes back to the cave, he tries to convince his mates, say, you need to go outside because you are living a terrible life, this is not it, this is not how you should live, because it's a lie, and the other person don't want to live. It's frightening, it's unsettling, they don't believe him, he's just, he or she, hopefully one day, just a liar. So there's nothing to be seen outside the cave. They don't want to see anything. And where is justice here? Where is the idea of goodness? The idea of goodness is in this character that feels one with this essence. Although the sun is painful at first, and the truth is unsettling, he recognizes, or she recognizes that truth, and he feels in peace with herself. He had sorry, I'm changing from he to she very quickly now. She feels in peace with what she is. So according to Plato, not everyone has the strength to live outside the cave. There are people that are just servant, their psyche, their their life, their essence is that of a peasant. They can take care of the basic needs to survive, but they can't go beyond that. Then there are those who might get free from the chains and can fight for the other people. They have courage, and so they can be warriors. They can defend themselves and others and seek for the truth. But they don't have the intelligence that guardians might have, that the people who have the courage to go outside the cave might feel, might experience. So, in order to live in justice, in order to feel good, in order to be good persons according to Plato, we should live in such a way that our society reflects what we are, gives us a space to be what we should be. If we are guardians, being able to face the truth and try to convince others about this, about that truth. If we are warrior, being able to give space to our courageous soul. If we are servants, if we are simple people, we should have the opportunity to serve others and provide them with the basic needs that have to be fulfilled. So this essence can be seen and let in and recognized in different ways according to the place that we inhabit with our body, according to the ability that our soul, our body has to look at it. So it's a very refined and complex system that we might consider belonging to a virtue ethics because it's very connected to our disposition, our character, the psychological work we might want to do with ourselves. Now. Aristotle is definitely the father instead of virtue ethics. His system is as beautiful and complex as Plato's one. But I will not go there now. Now I will just try to explain what is good. What is the good for for Aristotle, and how this good connects to virtue. There is a book, Nicomachean Ethics, that is absolutely important to understand Aristotle's ethics. Then we have Eudaimonia Ethics or his politics that are as well conducive to the understanding of his ethical thinking. But in general, if we read the first chapter, let's say, although they are called books, the first chapter of Nicomachean Ethics, we can have an idea of Aristotelian ethical thought. So according to Aristotle, ethics is a techne to be, is definitely a technology for life. With ethics, we try to embrace something that is essential. We try to capture an essential truth that is declined in different ways according to different customs and human beings. What matters is to reach a telos, basically, to reach a goal. And we call this goal good, the goodness. This telos is orton, or better, ortos, is the correct way of behaving. And character is important as much as we can humor this goal, we can achieve this goal. So there's no precise disposition that we cannot change through our habits and our repeated decisions to work on that particular trait, especially if that trait helps us to achieve a specific goal. Now, how can we define these goals? How do they look like? According to Aristotle, we can divide goals in two big categories. So there are goals that are, or the good, what is good for us, it's something that can be for its own sake or for other. So what is good for other, and we do that because it's good for for others is generally connected to the desire to achieve honor, to be praised by others. So it's a sort of a census good, because it lasts just as long as we can be praised by others, only the time our senses can perceive its presence. Then there's a form of goodness that is instead for its own sake. And this is what we call eudaimonia. Again, eudaimonia, as I said before, is a Greek word that comes from eu, which means well, and daimonia, which comes from daimon. What was the daimon? The daimon was the jinn, they would say, or the guardian angel, the kind of spirit that is there to guide us. It's our highest self, we might say. So eudaimonia is a word that can be translated with well-being, happiness. We are happy because our highest self is fulfilled, is feeling in peace. This good that is for its own sake and is not connected to the praise of or blame that others can put on us is divided into two other groups, according to Aristotle, in possession and use. We are happy when our body as well as our soul possess those traits that can make us good persons. So we hold moral virtues when we can possess courage, for example, or generosity, and so on. Yet, the highest form of virtue that makes us feeling good and appear as a good and virtuous person is in the use. So it's something that we use. So not only we possess the traits that make us be good person in that society, but we use with our soul, with our spirit, those traits. We exert them, and through habits we make them stronger and stronger. Excellence, Aristotle used to say, is a matter of habits. Do repeatedly what is good, what is the best for us. So we are a morally good person if we repeatedly do what is morally good, not because other people are going to praise us for that, but because we feel it's good for our soul, because it's good for its own sake. So being a just person, being a good friend, being a wise person is something that is virtuous and can be highly good only if it's exerted. Now, we can close here with just this remark. Both Plato and Aristotle are two philosophers that normally can be put in the category of normative ethics. Better, the ethics can be placed under the umbrella of normative ethics. And normative ethics, as I pointed and I keep pointing in our next lessons, is that ethics that is concerned about the definition of norms that can structure our sense of normality. Now, I'd like just to emphasize how both in Plato and in Aristotle the meaning of good and virtuousness and justice is connected to the word eudaimonia. And again, the word eudaimonia means eudaimon, comes from eudaimon and means the well self, the well higher self. So we are happy, we live a good life, we are virtuous when our highest self is fulfilled, is in peace with itself. We started our lesson by reflecting on the notion of alienation, that a sense of normality and norms and society or family system can make us feel. So I think it's important to reflect on the shadows that Aristotelian or Socratic and Platonic ethics might bring along. Eudaimonia maybe does not necessarily coincide with normality, with sticking to norms, rules. Maybe eudaimonia, well-being, flourishing, not necessarily belongs to what we would define today ethical, being ethical. And if we reflect on Homeric poems, we can easily see how ethics not necessarily coincide with being good and correct, but rather it might coincide with being strong and fulfilled. So this is it for this lesson. Thanks for bearing with me. And again, if you have questions, you can find me at susi.ferrarello@gmail.com. Thanks. Bye.